Ayo, what's up, fellas? I'm with Inconvenient Truth today, one of my favorite TikTokers. He covers news, he covers current events from a leftist perspective. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me. So basically, what you said, I cover news and current events with leftist and anti-imperialist kind of a point of view, and I always want to make sure that they also have a pro like global South perspective because I feel like that is really missing in just popular American discourse and news and current events because everything you see, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but Americans will obviously talk from a Western perspective and an American perspective. And even when they're talking about, things that are that are anti-imperialist, they still come at it from a pro-Western perspective. And I feel like, when the day I joined TikTok was the day posted my first TikTok because I scrolled for like a few minutes and immediately I was like, oh, okay, like I understand what's missing here. There's this need for this pro global South perspective that talks to the Western audience in a Western way. And, a lot of that is happening more and more. So, yeah, basically cover current events and news from a pro global South perspective.
Absolutely. I think one of the most annoying things about the news is that even when you're in the global South, it's just filled with America. America started to
Exactly. Yeah.
a grip on the culture, I would say, the global super culture, in a way that's.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. America has like a chokehold on just culture in the world. Right? It's not like, China's not driving culture. Global culture, right? Russia's not, doing culture in a way that America is. And you can only do it in an English speaking country, right? That's why we see, more Australian, and not to pick on Australia, but, there's more Australian content creators that get discovered than, a lot of these maybe like a South Korean content creator, right? Because they speak English. And I think that is really, really important. And a lot of the news I cover is, local Hebrew news in Israel, and a lot of it is also local Arab news in the Arab world, right? I hate that word, Arab world, but when you see Westerners covering what's going on in, for example, the Middle East, they will go to Al Jazeera, right? And not to pick on Al Jazeera, I think they do some great reporting, but Al Jazeera, has a very Western bent. A lot of their it did well because it had a Western bent, right? Globally, but a lot of sources like Al Mayadeen, for example, right, which is in the West, whenever the New York Times will talk about Al Mayadeen, they will say pro Hezbollah Al Mayadeen, right? But they're just a Lebanese newspaper that has, and Hezbollah has a political party, so it's like saying, oh, like pro-Trump New York Times because they mentioned Trump. Like that would be ridiculous, but it's how the United States does. And I also cover a lot of Hebrew news, not Israeli news, but Hebrew news in Hebrew where they're talking to the Israeli public. And a lot of those headlines would be like, is rape okay? But in Hebrew, and like that. Yeah, and a lot of Americans are like, wait, whoa, wait, what? So yeah, so I try to do that. I try to go to these sources and it's like, I feel like and we're talking on September 11th. So, hi, FBI agent who's listening, but it's going to be public. So I don't know why they would be spying, right? But basically, yeah, exactly. So I feel like after 9/11, wouldn't it be amazing if Americans had access to local Iraqi newspaper in, Arabic talking about the 9/11 and the aftermath from their perspective? I think Americans would find that extremely fascinating, right? And so that's the kind of perspective I try to bring. I also try to do like a lot of like a finance economic stuff. I know you're like a Marxist. My training and like I went to college and my field of study was finance and economics. So I try to bring a lot of how the global financial system works. How does the United States control the dollar? How is 33% of the entire world under some sort of U.S. economic sanctions? And when people hear U.S. economic sanctions, they don't really know what that means. And when you say that, oh, the U.S. economic sanctions basically mean they don't let two countries trade in fruit between them, then people are like, oh, wait, you know what? That's not right. So I try to do that as well.
Yeah. I think whatever view we get, because of that English language barrier, is very, it loses a lot of the nuances that are happening within the country in the first place. A lot of the discourses that are going on. And of course, we are the center of the universe in our media,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
at home and abroad. If a hurricane happens here, you're going to be getting it on the news in India or Pakistan. If a hurricane
100%. Yeah.
happens in China or Vietnam, nobody knows about it. You know.
Nobody cares. Yeah, 100%. Like it's like I remember whenever Katrina happened in the United States. I don't know how old you are, but that was also a very big international news. I was obviously not in the United States at that time, but I was outside of the US, and I saw that okay, like the entire world has to cry for things that happen in the United States, but when the United States does imperialism all around the world, it's fine. For example, yesterday I covered some news about how airstrikes led by the United States and the UK bombed a girls' school in Yemen, right? And that's like, it really hit with American women because that's a very American headline, like, right? How many times
By a
we've seen
feminist. A feminist did that
Ex-
bombing.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like if I said, but the pilot was, a member of the LGBTQ and Hispanic American, African American, Arab American, then they would be like, you know what, that girl's school in Yemen, yeah, yeah, you know what, okay, like only two girls, okay, they didn't even, they weren't very good students, and shit like that will come out, right?
Right. Yeah. Speaking of that, within recent memory, especially with the Sudan crisis, Congo
Yeah.
crisis, Gaza crisis, almost every single Western institution has been called into question about like how hollow it is, including the media. Why do you think that Western media remains so biased, like so Eurocentric, first of all, and also so biased in terms of how it represents, for example, the genocide within Gaza, which it calls a Hamas-Israel war, things like that?
Yeah, and that's because there's no such thing as independent media under capitalism, right? It just cannot be possible. Not just because these media people are bad or whatever. They're just doing a job. They're being told what to do. There's no such thing as investigative journalism. That shit doesn't exist, especially when you're like doing international news and basically doing cover for not even America but for like corporatism, right? Because I feel like there's no such thing as America. As we are talking yesterday, the debates happened between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And, it's Americans can't vote on the thing that matters the most, like going to war and, liquidating children. They can't vote on that. They can't vote on some of the biggest things, like, the price of goods and services. The FTC, for example, is completely toothless. There are the regulatory bodies that are there to, regulate industries are completely toothless. And Americans also, even the, for lack of a better term, like the most smooth-brained Fox News watching, gerontocracy, they also know that they're being fed propaganda. It's just that they just happen to agree with the propaganda that they, will do that. And it's not just an American thing, right? I'm from Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of propaganda there as well. George, like whatever country you choose, right? A lot of that exists there, but Americans are just the best at doing propaganda because there's just more money here. And the media are just being told, hey, this is the narrative we want to do. And I worked a lot of for a lot of these think tanks that produce a lot of these materials that are disseminated to mass media and stuff like that. So after I graduated college from America, I was very naive. I was, like a lib. Like when I was going to college was the year of the, Trump, when he was actually the boogeyman, like, 2015, 2016. And I was, completely in the Bernie camp. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was Mr. Lib. And so after I graduated college, I was, swept up in all of this propaganda. And I thought, yeah, like, I'm going to do good. Like, I'm not going to join the private sector. I'm going to go into this think tank that does X, Y, and Z good stuff. And then you go in and first day you realize, oh my God, they're just, the donors call the shots. Whatever the donors say, you just produce propaganda, right? So immediately it was like, oh, okay, so in a capitalist country, if you want to have any sort of, power or influence, you just have to be a capital owner. You cannot be a politician. You cannot be a pop star. You cannot be a media figure. There's only one category that has influence in a capitalist system. That's literally the owners of capital, right? And I'm talking about not your, finance YouTuber with an app, right? I'm talking about the Cargill Industries, who control the food and stuff like that. So it was a very like, and it only happened to me because after 9/11, of course, seeing it from outside of the United States and all of the things that happened, the Iraq War, that was very radicalizing. And then there was a decade prior to October 7th where the public hate towards Muslim and Islam was kind of dying down in the West, right? The West had moved on to other enemies in 2022 or 2021 when, the Russia-Ukraine thing happened.
Hispanic people, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, China's enemy number one, so we were like, hey, like, it's kind of, and then October 7th happened and, Islam and Muslims are back in the spotlight.
Yeah, it is insane how controlled. I think American propaganda is probably the greatest propaganda on earth because most people don't even realize that they're being fed a narrative, right? It's almost presented as an objective truth, when in fact it is a very curated, corporatized narrative. Going back to what you said you worked for a think tank. Could you expand a little bit more, whatever you're comfortable with giving? Of course, how was that experience like?
So that experience was good in the sense that I basically learned how, because I was very naive, I thought, and especially coming from Southeast Asia, where I'm from a very poor family, so we grew up kind of like idolizing these Western NGOs that would come in and, like fix stuff, right? And I wasn't aware of the, that the NGOs are, there's a way to put these countries down, right? I was just a kid. So growing up, I really liked these institutions that, such as the UN. And, I was fed this propaganda. I didn't know any better. Is only because I thought that, of course, they know what they're talking about in CNN. This is America we're talking about, right? So the Global South had this perspective of America up until, I think, the early 2000s. The aftermath of 9/11 completely shattered that. Like, it's completely shattered. And then I feel like in the 90s, America still got away with it because shit was still good for the American public in the 90s, right? The deal was, hey, we get to do a lot of imperialism and a lot of regime change and, really weird stuff. But the American people also ate really good, right? So I was not an adult, but I grew up in the 90s, right? I think you're a lot younger, so you probably don't remember the heady days of the 90s. It was extremely, yeah. So, it was like, you're going to ask your parents, it was great being American in the 90s. You couldn't, because it was the start of this, global hegemonic control that the United States had. I don't want to say that they didn't have it prior to the 90s, but after the 90s, especially during the Clinton administration, there was this shift in America where it was like, okay, we can just go and conquer the world, guys. And that obviously materialized under Bush. And so 2-3 decades ago, America had a decision to make, which is, are we going to be the imperialist country that is a manufacturing giant, or are we going to be an imperialist country that outsources the manufacturing, right? And America made a tremendously big strategic mistake when they gave away technical manufacturing to China. That, I think, was the biggest mistake America made in the last 100 years, because yesterday they woke up and they're like, fuck, we can't make microchips. We are probably going to lose the EV war and quantum computing and all of these sectors that you need, that is going to, lead you to prosperity for the next 100 years. And so America's only hope now is to destabilize China. And that's really hard to destabilize China because, not only is China technically extremely good. For example, they won the EV war, not because, they were like, hey, we need to win the EV war, because American cell phone manufacturing companies like the Apples of the world basically decided, hey, let's just get them to make a lot of our phones. So China started making phones. They started making the batteries in the phones. And then China basically figured out the lithium ion batteries that are in all of our phones. If you make it bigger, guess what? It could power a car. If you make that bigger, it could power a bigger car. If you make it bigger, it can power a space station. So China figured out that, okay, if we just capture all of the lithium ion production, and that also means getting a lot of the African mines. And this is in 2001. In 20 years, one day US will wake up and we would be so far ahead in the EV war that you just cannot do anything. And that is exactly what happened. They, a couple of days ago, it was reported that China gave $50 billion to Africa African countries to for economic development. As a part of that deal was China gets first dibs on a lot of the lithium ion. And the thing is, the United States is already trying to spin this story as, oh, China is going and taking a lot of the reserves from Africa, but they're paying pretty penny for it, right? That they're paying the money for it, as opposed to America, who are like, hey, we're just going to take the lithium ion, and if you don't do it, we'll blow you up. So that, yeah.
I'm sorry, but yeah, for America in the 90s, I mean, it was a short-term profit gain, but I think because capitalism is so unable to look ahead long-term and is so obsessed with these short-term profits, they just exported it over to China easily without thinking about how this could shoot itself in the ass. Also, I think a lot of capitalists aren't really that loyal to the nation state itself. They don't give a fuck if manufacturing isn't.
Not at all. That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, and not at all. And so much so that, Goldman Sachs and what's that other company, JP Morgan, when the BRICS are currently now creating a financial system that, is a rival to SWIFT. Do you know what that is? The global financial system that the United States controls? SWIFT.
I'm not familiar with it. Could you explain to me and other?
Yeah. So in a very basic way, SWIFT is the global monetary system that underpins all of global trade, right? So basically, in 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States basically kicked Russia off of SWIFT. So overnight, the United States pressed a button whereby the biggest country by landmass, Russia, and one of the most historic country in all of humanity, was just taken out of the global financial system. And then China saw that, and other countries saw that, and they were like, fuck, like, we need a new system that rivals SWIFT. And that's why a big part of BRICS is to create this different monetary system whereby countries can exchange goods and services that doesn't have to do with the United States control SWIFT, right? And so China's creating this new system under BRICS, which will rival the SWIFT, and it's already in preliminary, findings. And both Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they went to China and were like, hey, we love this new system that you're creating to rival SWIFT. Yeah, because it'll hurt the US, but they don't care. They're like, oh, China's going to make a lot of money. So they went in on this system, and they're writing reports of how this system is great, and it's going to fuck the US, but who cares, right? Because Goldman Sachs and will still make money. So yeah, to your point, they don't care. Like, they're basically creating a new system that rivals the United States, and just because they know they'll make a lot of money for China.
Yeah, it's very much short-term profits. Who gives a fuck about long-term? And if you think long-term, if you're a capitalist and you think long-term, and your competition thinks short-term, they get a leg up on you. Like, the whole system incentivizes you to think short-term. But since we have talked about BRICS, do you believe that BRICS does have staying power? It is a coalition of countries that are not that obviously ideologically unified. They're very loosely unified, and will they even be able to create an alternative to the U.S. petrodollar, in your opinion?
That's a great question. I don't think they'll be able to create a competitor to the U.S. petrodollar itself, because to do that, I think you would need a singular entity, not just, as you mentioned, the scattering of, like, Iran and India are not friends. Iran, India, South Africa, so it's like it's a very loose thing. But I believe in the BRICS because of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it's because all of these countries and the United States overplayed their hand. What they did was it would have been fine if they only sanctioned poorer countries. The minute they kicked Russia off of SWIFT was the day that the BRICS got stronger, because then they were like, okay, now we have to go balls to the wall and create this different payment infrastructure to facilitate global trade. And that would have never happened if the United States did not sanction Russia. Because, as you mentioned, the political will to pull off something is so gigantic that it has to be an existential crisis for these countries to really just be like, okay, now is the time. Because to create a SWIFT alternative is a humongous undertaking. And it also goes to show that, how Goldman Sachs are such mercenaries. At first, they were like, this system will never work. And then, it's in its preliminary system and it was working, Goldman Sachs immediately went to China, was like, okay, like, no, we want a part of this. And now they're also helping test it and make it better. So, and Goldman Sachs also makes money through the American SWIFT system, and they're also going to make money through the Chinese system. Just a few days ago, I was reading this report about farmers in the United States who were getting their ass kicked under this new BRICS system, because what had happened is under SWIFT, let's say two countries, and I'm just giving examples here, Brazil and China want to trade in soybeans, for example, 1 million bushels or however soybeans are calculated. It had to go through the United States dollar, and even if it didn't use the dollar, it would still have to be enacted by the SWIFT system. That's the old system, right? And so what Bloomberg and all these other financial data companies would do is they know this data that Brazil just sold 1.5 million bushels of soybean or whatever to China. They would then take this data and sell it to US farmers, because, you know, if you know the global production as a farmer, that's like a huge cheat code. You can then use that and be like, okay, like this is what the global demand is like, and we will temper our production by that. Fast forward 6 months ago, where this new financial system is being worked, no United States financial institution has eyes on this, right? So now the United States farmers are getting absolutely fucked because they don't know who's buying what that are not using this Western, system. And one example was in just 6 months ago, or like a year ago, China had put in 2 million orders of like wheat, because the United States is the breadbasket of the world, and then a few months later canceled that shipment. And then the United States does not know how China fulfilled that demand for wheat in China. Did they boost production internally in China? Did they get it from Australia? Did they get it from, some other country? The United States has no idea. And the United States farmers that for the last 100 years had this incredible cheat code where they could temper their production no other farmer in the entire world could do. Now they can't do that. And it's going to get a lot worse when this payment system or this mortgage system is live, right? And it's supposed to be live in October in Russia in the Kazan conference. So we'll see. But yeah, so you see, it's already having material damage to the United States.
Yeah. I think America really did shoot itself in the foot by sanctioning Russia, especially as huge Russian assets were seized in Switzerland. What it showed to a lot of even individual millionaire, billionaires assets, what it showed to a lot of people from other countries is that if our country is doing something bad, we cannot rely on this system as it currently is set, because our stuff could be confiscated beyond our own control, because our country just simply pisses off the United States for whatever reason. Yeah. And of course, it's had to create alternatives for Russia to sell off its oil. India and Russia have obviously gotten a lot closer in terms of their trade of oil. So it's really forced the global South to look for alternatives. So I think your answer is correct, that even if BRICS is not ideologically aligned, they are out of necessity. Could you clarify what is this alternative monetary system? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it exactly. That BRICS system.
So basically, it's in a very layman's term, it's going to be opposition to SWIFT. So right now, the SWIFT system, SWIFT, I think it's like an acronym for something, but so basically the SWIFT system is the monetary system that underpins global trade. So there's this, the United States, if they wanted to, can stop a transaction from happening between any two countries on earth. And the thing is, when I said that in one of my TikToks, and I got, really clowned for it, and a lot of other Western, CIA-backed content creators were like, oh, this is not possible at all. 100% it is possible, by the way. The United States can right now, even if there are two British citizens inside of London that want to send money to each other, the United States, if they wanted to, can stop that transaction. The United States has the material control to stop transaction anywhere in the world. And even the dark money stuff that goes on around the world, for example, when Iran sells oil to Oman, for example, right, that's outside of the US financial network. Not only that the United States has full visibility on that, they could also just, bomb that really when that happens. And the United States has done that a lot of the time because of all of the satellite data it gets, right? So however much people think the United States controls global finance, 100x that. right? Because that's the level of control it has.
Right.
So, and the rest of the world, in my it was okay with that up until 2022 or 2021, whenever Russia invaded Ukraine. The rest of the world, which is crazy to me, all of these powerful countries were okay with that. Recently, Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary of the United States, came out and basically wrote a letter to Biden saying that you need to ease up on sanctions. We need to think about how we don't weaponize the sanctions, because recently what the United States did was they threatened allied countries, Japan and the Netherlands, because they wanted to buy low-cost AI chips from China, right? And so they're like, hey, like now you're like acting like a mob boss, because the United States only had this hegemon because they wouldn't, crank the pressure on allied countries. They would only do it to Iran and stuff, but now they're doing it to China. They're doing it to the Netherlands. Recently, there was a report by Foreign Policy magazine, which is basically the foreign policy whisperer for lawmakers. It's very held in high regard in Washington. And Foreign Policy magazine basically came out and said that the United States, it's not pressuring Australia, the UK, and all these other loser English-speaking countries to be militarized enough. So it wants Australia to only manufacture all of the submarines for the United States. It wants the UK to manufacture all of the aircrafts. And it is angry at the United States because they haven't pressured those loser European governments into becoming militarized states that only help the United States. And the fact that this was published, and you can look it up, it's just Foreign Policy magazine. That means that United States, the State Department will take this into consideration, and now will go to the UK, which are like an economic backwater, will go to Europe, which doesn't make anything, so they don't have any leverage, and be like, hey, bitch, you're going to be making submarines for now on. And not just submarines, this one thing for the submarine. I don't care, what you have to do, but that's the thing. So that is where the United States is going. And Europe, their governments might be flaccid, but their people are very dynamic, right? So they're like, wait, why are we going to be making like the submarines for the United States, right? We are Europe. We should be making software. We should be making our own products. But they don't know that they already lost. They use American-made software on Chinese-made hardware. The Europe is so unbelievably irrelevant that it is very concerning for the rest of the world, because now they're just a vassal state for the United States. And I believe that a strong Europe, and this might be a little bit, controversial, but I think a strong Europe is good, because a strong Europe has usually been a check on the United States, but a weak Europe is very dangerous. The fact that the people in Europe don't want the Russia-Ukraine war, but the governments of Europe do, that is only because Europe is weak and they're not a manufacturing giant. And India, for example, is now a bigger economic power manufacturing giant than Europe, because Poke, you're young, so you probably don't remember when India was not always this powerful. Are you of Indian descent, or
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so India was never this powerful as it is now. Like the last time India was this powerful was pre-colonialism, where they controlled 33% of the global trade. But now, because they have a lot of domestic economics, and it was unthinkable for someone of my age to see India and their foreign minister give the United States the middle finger and say that not only are we going to keep buying oil from Russia, we are going to increase it. And now India is the second largest buyer of oil from Russia. And the fact that the United States hasn't been able to do anything about that is very telling.
Yeah, I think it's a very odd situation, because during the Cold War, obviously the brunt of world economic power was within the West. They had factories were within America, and it was sort of a different system than it is now, where America would grab resources, finish them in their factories, and then resell them to sort of pseudo colonies. And China, of course, has completely flipped over the manufacturing control of the world. Is now the center of world manufacturing. It's the world's factory, you could sort of call it. And so whenever America does sanctions now on a country, it just brings it closer to, say, China or Russia, right? Sanctions, of course, still have adverse effects on economies. America still controls a lot. But and sanction nowadays just means a closer relationship and more trade with China in 100%. Practice for a lot of countries, which creates an alternative and makes America absolutely weaker. I also think Russia has shown that you can sort of fight America and resist it.
Mhm.
America spends the majority of the world's military spending. I believe figures of up to I forget, like 45%, things like that.
Yeah.
Russia only contributes like 3% of world spending on military, and yet with 3%, they are holding off the brunt of. Well, Ukraine is a proxy of America, of course, but the brunt of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
American imperialism and funding. It's I think we are definitely entering into a new world. Um,
Well, yeah, sure.
no, if you were going to say something, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. That's I totally agree.
Yeah. So
I also had I had a question for you, if you don't mind.
yes.
So, it is very rare to see, especially, like young Americans such as yourself, especially people of color. And, I don't mean to pass judgment, but of Indian descent, where, the Indian American is very like, hey, you do the thing, you get good grades, you take the corporate job, you become a consultant or like, doctor or whatever. And you're like, you have a very, like, compared to America, like normal Americans, a very radical view. So what was it like how you grew up in America? Because I feel like if I grew up in America, I wouldn't be able to resist all of the propaganda. Because I think back to the propaganda that I was exposed to in my home country, and that shit, isn't the propaganda of the US, right? And even then, it worked a little bit. So, how did you escape that rabid propaganda? And not only does escape, but come out the other way with, your Marxist and communist ideologies. Like, what was your? How did you even get into that?
It would definitely be my family. My family has a long history of labor organizing, especially within communist parties in India itself, the Naxal
Well, let's
movement,
go.
things like
What
that.
part of India?
Punjab. So
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
so very
okay,
very
yeah.
radical politics, especially around the
Yeah, I should have guessed
uh,
Preet. I was like, okay, Punjab. I'm not from India. It's in a surrounding country. I'll tell you offline. But yeah, like that makes sense. Punjabs have always been extremely based.
I wouldn't say we're half based. As a good portion,
Yeah,
we're more based than the rest of India. We're more
My dad did swing a wine bottle at a Punjabi gentleman in a when I was a boy in 2007 in a hotel in Nepal where there was a cricket match. That's all I'll say. But yeah, so I love the Punjab, love their passion.
Yeah, we are definitely we love our alcohol and fights and things like that.
Yes,
We're
yeah,
very fiery people. But
yeah.
most people nowadays no longer really get their news sources from cable TV, from newspaper, traditional sources. Most people are getting their news sources from online, especially sources like you. What positive and negative effects do you think this democratization of consuming news has had on the just consciousness of people?
Yeah, so I'll start with the negative one first. The negative one is it's very easy to capture an audience and radicalize them. Do you see like there's a lot of grifters around. It's very easy. It's like, oh, like they trust you. You bring them a perspective that they weren't open to, and when you do that to someone, they are like, oh, okay, now I trust everything you say. And so it's very easy to be like, okay, like like, hey, the American state is bad because X, Y, and Z, and now buy my course, right? That's very easy to do. So that's obviously the bad part. And recently, I don't know if you've been following, but their right-wing conservative commentators are being targeted by the State Department because they allegedly took money from a Russian source, right? Even though he's really like funding like the Ben Shapiro's of the world, right? So there's obviously that. If I was like a billionaire, for example, I could find very charismatic on-camera people, and I could just write them inexpensive checks compared to my money and peddle whatever propaganda I want to peddle, right? So that's obviously the bad. The good is the fact that we can bring sources like Al Mayadeen, sources like, that don't get Al Jarida in Kuwait, sources such as, that don't never get talked about, where if you hit translate, it's from Arabic to English, so the lettering goes from one side to the other, right? So a lot of Americans were like, whoa, like, and when I first did that, I think the most common DMs I get on TikTok is no one trusts your terrorist sources, right? That's the most, you know what I mean, because it's in Arabic, it's there. But I think that's the good part where you can get on the ground news. For example, you know, Abu Ubaidah, right, the infamous spokesperson from Hamas, who's like almost a celebrity in the Arab world. People in America don't even know who Abu Ubaidah is, right? And the fact that, sharing one of his speeches, and people are like, oh, okay, like, so a lot of Americans now know Abu Ubaidah and the legend of Yahya Sinwar, right, would have never come out if it wasn't for independent media such as myself. I saw this one person. That was when the discourse around TikTok on, African Americans versus Arabs was really going on. I saw this clip from Yahya Sinwar was going viral, when in 2021 he had an interview with Vice News where he was saying, Yahya Sinwar, the current leader of Hamas, that he feels bad about George Floyd. He took the name George Floyd, and he was talking about how much the plight of African Americans and George Floyd is very similar to Palestine, and that was Yahya Sinwar. So that clip was going viral, and that's not possible if there isn't this like citizen journalism kind of a thing going on. So good and bad, but I feel like the people should be given, and of course this is not a radical take, of course, but it's just, you see both sides and then you make up your mind. Do you think, and that's the best way. It doesn't go the positively, of course. Sometimes people will see it and be like, no, I still like the genocide. So that's a possibility as well. But yeah, overall, there's a good and bad, but it 100% is better than, the corporate media that we had for ever since televisions were invented. And I also want to talk about the role of TikTok, because obviously TikTok has its problems, and I'm not a fan, of course, and I'm sure you've experienced a lot of the problems from TikTok as well. But the fact that they have this algorithmic driven, just strangers content showing to other strangers was such an unlock, was such an innovation that could not have happened in the West, because the social media structuring in the West, and I'm old enough to where in 2005 I had my own like whatever Friendster account or whatever the social media was, right? And social media was always you and your network. And it was such a profound innovation when TikTok came in and had this algorithmic based stranger to stranger, that I think changed the narrative and changed the game in such a way that the imperialists still don't know how to put the genie back in the box. So definitely I hate TikTok, fuck ByteDance, but my God, this innovation of, just like now everybody's doing short form video, right? But this algorithm was a game changer. And that's why people like you and me, Preet, we would never be welcomed in any, mainstream format. You wouldn't be like, so let's talk about why communism, they would kick you out immediately, right? There's no, yeah, even if you did this on Instagram, I don't know if you have an Instagram or a YouTube, but like that shit is really hard to hit. But on TikTok, they'll find the other, and what TikTok does is it has these two algorithmic, it's a very, very, very old algorithm. Of course, they have changed it, but first, it was where they would show your content to everyone that hard agrees, and that immediately show your content to everyone that hard disagrees. And that I still think is really, really cool, because, when I remember one of my first videos that I ever posted was, I don't know how, like China was the biggest Muslim country is outside of China or whatever. And at first it was like, yeah, like great job. And then immediately it was all of right-wing America being like, who the fuck cares? So it does that. And I really like that. And I think TikTok, after the ban and everything, changed their algorithm after the pressure from the ADL. But the OG Douyin algorithm, I think, was a humongous game changer. And that's why me and you are, have public platforms, because we should not be having public platforms in the West with the, ideas that you spread and the ideas that I spread. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason why they're banning TikTok, especially since they can't control it like Instagram or YouTube or Facebook. And I think the internet's biggest positive is, of course, like allowing motherfuckers like us to get our voices out. Whereas, before, the best you would get was like, the most left you would get was like some guy on CNN saying, maybe the Iraq war is half bad, like Nothing too
Then you
crazy.
get a lot of like think pieces written about him and the dangers of talking about terrorism. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and even like a half measure, even like a half measure against the establishment gets you like and I hate that word establishment, but it is the establishment. Even like a half,
Yeah.
yeah, even like a half measure word against the establishment gets you like condemnation across the board within traditional media. But the negatives definitely are that first of all, obviously billionaires can fund crackpots,
Yes.
like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro. These people, a lot of the PragerU guys are sort of artificially boosted
Yep.
by the algorithm through just millions of dollars of funding. And secondly, of course, people fall into echo chambers wherein like conspiracy theories get spread
Mhm.
out. And that's not only an issue for the left, of course, but though I think most people on the quote unquote left are a little bit measured, they will consume sources
Yeah.
outside of just.
Because the left is just skepticism, right? But the right is also skepticism, but they come from a low IQ take, right?
Yeah.
It's just skepticism, but the skepticism is like thousands of years of vaccine research. I don't buy it. Where the left skepticism is not always, especially not in America, because there is no left in America, right? There is left in America is I love Kamala Harris, right? So that's what Americans think is the left. But yeah, like 100%, I think the left has a little bit more skepticism, but they're very easy to co-opt. I think it's not just the left, but Americans are very easy to co-opt because Americans go by aesthetic. Like I feel like a lot of Americans, like Hassan Piker is considered like the preeminent leftist content creator, even though a lot of his views are very actually mid-tier down the road kind of takes, right? But because he has he's like physically attractive and he speaks the language of the he's not out here talking about Marxist idealists like you are, right? So that's why he gets invited to the DNC. You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of a part of that, but I have been impressed with the American people because there is this thirst for the other side. And not because they're like, esoteric, really deep thinking people, but they have been so starved from the other side that other countries haven't. And not because other countries are better or more like, like they're like good countries, but because they aren't as good as imperialism as control as the US is. You have to give US is very like if there was a gold medal for like imperialism, boy, the US is very good. And now that I've studied the UK imperialism very closely, they suck. Like their imperialism was really bad compared to the United States. And that's why the US imperialism has been up until the last 15, 20 years, where it was this like new crop of bozos that run the US. It was actually very, very good. And they had set up, especially the post-Clinton years, for 100, 200, 300 years of US imperialism. It's just that there were 3 or 4 corporations that, as you mentioned, wanted this short-term profitability, that they were like, yeah, it's up. Yeah, I don't care if it burns down in 100 years. I just want short-term profitability. And a big part of that, yeah, is the stock market, because the stock market is quarterly. So if you don't have the numbers in 3 months, the stock's gonna go down. And that has created this like skewed incentive where you don't want to make good business fundamentals, where it's like, I should have more revenue than my cost. But now it's like, I don't care what the cost is. Let's just get users up. And that's like a very perverted sense of, capitalism and just doing business, which is not sustainable.
Yeah, it also gives you just an amazing competitive edge, producing things within a labor market where they're not as productive, so labor is cheaper. With like in China, it gives you a huge edge where like if a consumer is buying like a drill, doesn't give a fuck if it's made in America or China. Like I just want the $14 drill compared to like the $40 drill as if it was produced in America. And then also I think just one negative also would just be like conspiracy theories such as like the Haitians eat cats, the Venezuelan migrants taking over a apartment building.
Apartment complex.
Yeah, it's yeah, obviously, and they've reached a national level now with like QAnon conspiracy theories where they are being spouted by a major politician. And so certainly I think as much as the internet is like
probably the most famous person in America and the most famous political personality.
Yeah. So it is a double-edged sword where these conspiracy theories reach the highest levels of office and get spouted within mainstream, these fringe online ideas. But also, I think, like, the mainstream news wasn't doing fringe ideas that were crazy, like WMDs in Iraq, or conspiracy
Yeah.
theories such as that. So, and of course, yeah, you're right. The way that Americans trust institutions, Americans have a couple institutions that they trust de facto and can sort of control their emotions aesthetically. And that is like the news media, the culture around them, Hollywood, and even
Yeah.
like sort of like the State Department, right? The government. As much as Americans are distrusting of these institutions, they're also very trusting at the same time. Where on one hand, bunker babies, right? Babies being killed within Qatar or Qatar or Kuwait. I'm tripping right now.
Whichever one. Sure.
It was Qatar. It was Qatar.
Yeah, it's got that.
Yeah. Babies being killed by the Iraqi army within Qatar are a good reason to go to war with Iraq, but suddenly babies being killed within Iraq is not a good reason to stop, right? Like, on one hand, Americans care about Arab babies. On the other hand, they don't give a fuck about Arab babies.
Exactly.
Babies being beheaded within Israel, or women raped within Israel, both of which were false, of course, but the news media being an instrument of American imperialism was spread nonstop as if it was the truth. Purposely, in my opinion,
100%.
For sure, manufacture as much consent as possible. You could not escape this false story, and whatever retractions were given were done so late that the cultural memory survived way beyond the contractions of the real, very real fact.
100%.
And so Americans very much gave a fuck about rapes of women and beheaded babies, but when it came to Palestinian babies being beheaded, so it really is less so about people killed. It really is less so about just material realities. It's more so about the aesthetic, how it is presented by the media, how much it is repeated. Goes to that old Goebbels line of if you tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth. And I think that's what America is. It will flood you with this one perspective, which is propaganda, information that is from a political perspective, one political perspective. It will flood you with this propaganda to a point where you are unable to escape it until enough people believe it as a truth or is a cultural truth that it can get away with it, even if it is a flat-out lie.
100%. And it works. It works wonderfully well. And now I feel like the next stage will be they don't even need to manufacture consent. Because right now, if you see what Israel is doing in the West Bank, they didn't need a false flag October 7th or like a big event. They just do it, right? There's no reason to because it's just like, I think the American government and the American people are like at this standoff where the American government is like, look, I know that you know, and you know that I know that you know. But if you say something, I'll kill you. And if you don't say anything, that's the trade-off. But if you don't say anything, Poke, if you today are making content that's pro-US government, you have an awesome life. You will be very rich. You will be very famous. You will be taken care of. So it's like the incentive to, for example, the Tim Pool and them, they were getting paid $400,000 a month to make a video for Tenet Media that got 8K views. It's a pretty good deal. And it's 99.99% of humanity will take that deal. We just gotta say Kamala's good, and Palestinians sometimes, how they treat gay people, what happens to African Americans in Palestine. All you have to say that, and you get a 20K check.
For
it's a great deal.
Views. That is
right. That's a great deal. And the thing is, the most principled person will take that deal for an unbelievably cheap price. And I'm always surprised at how cheap the price is. When you see a lot of these APAC donations, it's 35K. I'm like, what are you doing? That's it. That's all it takes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that a lot of people are paid off is that, or a lot of people spread propaganda is that they're not necessarily even given scripts or anything, right? They're not even given what to be told. What happens is just that these corporations, these institutions, these governments, they just find people that parrot viewpoints that are most beneficial to them, and they just give them money, right?
It's so much easier.
Yeah. Than just giving somebody a script and telling them what to do exactly. Just find somebody who is already sort of like a little bit niche and they agree with you exactly, or they do spread information that agrees with your motivations exactly, and just cut them some money and boost them to a point where they would have never naturally been able to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like a lot of people don't know that you can buy views and do all these kind of things, right, on social media.
You can. And I mean, so many people would not be famous without shit tons of money. Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro. Like, have you seen Steven Crowder's what he passes for Steven Crowder's comedy bits? Like, it's just him.
They're so bad. They're like objectively bad. It's really bad, and they would have never been, exactly as you said. Like, Ben Shapiro is not charismatic. Like, I can admit when people I don't like are charismatic. Trump is charismatic.
Absolutely.
Like, Bill Clinton was charismatic. Obama was incredibly charismatic, right? So there is a truth to that. But Ben Shapiro is not charismatic. If he had the just make it on your own, he would not be where he is today. His content sucks. And the thing is, he's not, for example, Nick Fuentes, right? He's very charismatic. And I think his following is natural. But Ben Shapiro's following is not natural because you can see that he's not charismatic and he doesn't have the power or the ability to wield like a big audience. None of those Daily Wire guys do, except for maybe Jordan Peterson back in the day where he was like, I don't know, like only doing misogyny. But now that he's also doing pro-Israel stuff, it doesn't hit as hard. But when he was only doing like, oh, women shouldn't, I don't know what he's like, women shouldn't work or study or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So you come from Marte. Yeah, that's his thing. So yeah, that shit I think genuinely hit because there are a lot of Americans that were like, oh, you know what, women shouldn't work, right, or whatever. But now the fact that he's this, whatever he is, it's this pro-Israel shill. Alpha males don't, or whatever his thing is, they don't hit us hard. And I've also been surprised that the alpha male content creation stuff, they have also been anti-Israel because the Andrew Tate, the Dan Bilzerian, whatever, they're the alpha male side, they've been very anti-Israel, but they are also anti-Israel in an actually anti-Semitic way rather than the anti-genocide way. It's just that the genocide also. So that's, I think, is really funny. But there's also this, problem in America where it's very easy to co-opt creators now, or just, if there are voices that are like important, it's very easy to just cancel them as well. So that is very, very problematic, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that the majority of Andrew Tate's audience is children. I can legitimately vouch for that. My 13-year-old stepbrother watches Andrew Tate, so it's not adults. It's not adults watching his content.
No, it's 100% children, or it's children, and it's also people who obviously don't have to go to work that day, right? Because if you have to and because you can be like a reasonable person. And also one thing I've been shocked at is how because prior to coming to the West, I just thought that it was going to be this bastion of intellectualism, and I've also been just shocked at how easy it is to fool people in the West, maybe in a naive way. Because I always, just to give you an example, my dad is a very pro Kamala Harris because they get CNN in my country, right? And he watches that and he's like, you know what? She does make a point, and she is hard against Israel. And it's just like, no, she's actually, so it works. The U.S. imperialist propaganda really does work, and it works very well outside of the United States. And the United States, what they do is they pay local television stations in all of these other countries they'll pay them more money to put in CNN over like the domestic news. And if you're like a cable, thankfully that's changing now, but they used to do that. They used to go, for example, the WWE was huge outside of the United States in the 90s and the 80s. This is because they went in and basically cut deals with local television there so that they can, have their garbage product there on TV all the time. So a lot of these things, people don't know that American imperialism and American brainwashing is a product that has been exported all around the world. And only recently do people know, okay, like Friends isn't how America did, because that show is like very famous outside of America too, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is being found out now, and that's being found out because of TikTok, because TikTok has a great foothold outside of the US, a lot of people are like able to do that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the ways that Western leftists, communists think of the third world or like the global South is that like they're all these based people who are able to see how evil America is,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're all like socialistic or like anti-American at least, and it's like I'm so sorry, but it is kind of the
Yeah, no, exactly. They're not, and yeah, it's the opposite. They love their Western propaganda. They love their, I don't know, Kardashian or whoever the star is now, right? They love that stuff, and I don't really blame them because shit's been so bad in the third world that they're like, hey, we just stopped getting bombed. Can we just have I don't know, like a popsicle? I'm so bad at coming up with like pop culture reference and like popsicles and Kardashians.
Can we have an
I'm a lot older than you all.
I don't know, an Among Us bar? Yeah, Mr.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can come through with the cool pop culture references. You're younger than I am, so I'm gonna leave that to you.
Yeah, I also work with children, so I'm in tune with the Gen Alpha culture, pretty much.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people worship, within the global South, worship America. They see America. America advertises itself very well, I will say. It advertises itself as a utopia where, you can come here with like $5 in your pocket, you put in enough elbow grease, and, you're living a good life in a McMansion, with like rappers like Jay-Z. And America never shows, ghetto, slums, homeless people. That's never how America is advertised to the global South.
America's only New York and one neighborhood in LA.
Yeah,
that's America,
pretty much.
right? That of
Still
course
there. It's the nicest neighborhood in America. The multi-million dollar. Yeah,
exactly. And most of America is extremely struggling, like not just struggling. And I think people also just, especially in the last couple of years, the prices of things have ballooned in such an exponential way that it's become impossible. Like you can have 2 incomes, 3 incomes, no kids. It's still not enough. Like you still cannot make the ends meet. So what even is enough? And that's the thing, to go back to where we started the conversation, where in the 90s, the imperialists in America understood that they have to have this balance where you have to make sure that the citizenry of the people that you govern over ate. They needed to eat, right? And this new crop of imperialists, I think they're just brain rotten by the United States, by the internet, that they're like, no, not only will the people of the United States not eat, I'm going to make sure that they suffer, because this new crop of imperialists are so dumb and so power hungry and have such incredible God complex that they think that you don't have to, give the people a circus every now and then. There's never a circus. There's only like hardship. So they lost that balance and they became so greedy, which is like, you already have infinity. Why do you still need more? And they overplayed their hand. And now, the state of Israel prior to October 7th, except for Arab Americans, no one talked about the state of Israel in America. It wasn't a dominant conversation. But because they got so greedy, because they overestimated the control that they had over the media and the people, they overplayed their hand. And now look at it. Now what's happening? The biggest challenge to the American dollar in the last 100 years has happened. There's a new financial system that's happening that's outside of the SWIFT system that the US completely controls. And now the state of Israel and all of this is completely out in the open, where, random Karens in their 50s are wearing keffiyehs and being like, fuck Benjamin Netanyahu, right? It is a existential threat for the United States. And that only happened because our oligarchs, I don't even want to say got too greedy, because they're already too greedy, wouldn't even let us have wouldn't even lie to us. You know what I mean? They could lie. Kamala Harris could lie and say, I will stop the genocide. I will stop sending weapons to Israel, and then keep sending weapons to Israel, and it would work. But the fact that she wouldn't even lie, like she wouldn't even lie to appease the genocide, and that's when people are like, okay, like what is even going on? Like, so I feel like the new crop of imperialists suck. You all are too dumb. You all took so much. The thing is, infinity divided by 2 is still infinity. You still win. And I think a lot of it is because the new imperialists are sons and daughters of old imperialists that had money and had everything to begin with. And the only thing that they get off on is the humiliation of poor people. I think that's like a legitimate thing. I know it's like a very like, what are you talking about? But I think because once you are a billionaire, especially if you grow up a billionaire, the only thing that gets you off is just mass control over people, money, because it doesn't mean anything to you. Like you know who Larry Ellison is?
No clue.
So Larry Ellison is the guy who founded Oracle. He's like in his 70s, one of the richest people on earth. He was basically one of the biggest checks to Elon Musk when he bought Twitter. And his son basically just bought Paramount yesterday. And you know, Paramount is this institution in the United States, and now it's just a plaything of this kid of a tech exec, right? So it just shows you where things are right now. They're just like, oh, like here you go, here's Paramount, you know. So, and this crop of imperialists are dumb. Larry Ellison, as evil as he is, was extremely smart. His son is a dumbass. And his son is going to be the new imperialist, and he's so bloodthirsty and vicious that, you know, he's Joffrey, if you know Game of Thrones.
Yeah, the way I would describe it is, obviously in this, I don't know Game of Thrones. I'm sorry, by the way.
No, you're better off not knowing.
Okay.
Yeah, extremely lame. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard good things about it. But in the 70s and 80s, America was going through that stagflation crisis, and to save itself, put a lot of the burdens of capitalism onto regular people, average people within America, whereas before they would get a nice cut of the imperialist loot. And so they created this system of neoliberalism, which led to massive inequality like we'd never seen before. And at first, neoliberalism was a little bit controlled. It was a little bit controlled. You know, Reagan, when the Lebanese civil war was happening, Reagan called Israel and told them to immediately stop, right? They had a little bit of power.
Weapons,
yeah, a little bit of self-control. But slowly but surely, because there are these incentive structures within capitalism, within this neoliberal mode of production, slowly but surely that greed kept on going on, that inequality kept on going on, this system kept on cycling through itself, eating itself. And now we are in a generation of bourgeois, imperialists, whatever you want to call them, rulers of America, oligarchs, that almost sort of believe, first of all, in their own propaganda and are hoarding wealth to a point, exercising power to a point where it's not even self-regulatory anymore, where it's not even stable anymore. And I think that what really sort of spelled the end of this system was the 2008 crash, right? That was when all of that inequality, all of that, first of all, growth, you know, neoliberalism saw amazing growth for a little while, right? All of that growth, all of that inequality became crashing down, and we've just sort of been struggling and slugging ever since.
100%, yeah. And that's the thing, that in the short term, neoliberalism works great for capital owners. But in the long term, when you still have to keep the, you know, like the wheel going, it just is not a sustainable method, because just killing people and stealing their resources is a limited strategy. It's not, at the end of the day, you still have to do the hard work of original innovation and then the technical manufacturing that comes with that innovation. You can't just, and the British, empire found that out. They thought that all Oxford University and Cambridge University needed to do was write treatises on how the global south is barbaric. But you still needed to make stuff, you dimwit. You still need to make, you know, like phones and infrastructure and stuff. And if you don't, you cannot outsource that. A lot of my thinking now is how third world countries can become self-independent, and a lot of the because, you know, like the revolution that happened recently in Bangladesh, for example, and they're doing nation building. And it's literally 2 words has been the success of every small country that could, right? Japan, South Korea, what have you. And I know South Korea had like a lot of imperialist bent and a lot of support from the United States, but that word is technical manufacturing. For a third world country to be powerful, there's only 2 words, technical manufacturing. And the United States thought, you know, like especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, that they can send technical manufacturing outside of the US. Didn't work too well. All of the medication in the United States is made in China. All critical infrastructure in the United States is made in China. And the biggest manufacturing power in the world, in our species history, has never lost a war. it's just impossible. You can just, if you can make stuff, you can just make more weapons, right? So the United States is in a very precarious situation. What they're going to try and do is they're going to try and do the Ukraine playbook, which the Ukrainians love the Ukraine playbook, which is get small country to attack big country we don't like. And they're really trying, they tried that with the Taiwan to China. Taiwan is getting a lot of cold feet. And now they're trying to get Philippines to do that to China. Philippines is, doesn't have the teeth to even mount anything against China. So they're in a very big bind. And this is why Jake Sullivan is, flying all around the world, having these meetings with the China's foreign minister, because the United States is fucked. Because not only do they not make microchips, which is basically the backbone of the next 100 years is going to be the AI chip. And the United States already lost that war because, all of it is made in Taiwan. Recently, Singapore and the United States is doing like a joint chip manufacturing thing. And it would have never been possible 20 years ago if the latest, greatest technology, other countries are colluding to make it and the United States had no say over it. It only happened because the United States overplayed their hand, basically sanctioned rich countries, and now, the Larry Ellison's sons and daughters of the world are going to get extremely fucked. Like there's no other way, because what are you going to do? You're going to make the iPhone in America, it's going to cost $25,000. Like there's no going back.
Yeah, and I also think America has sort of showed that it's dangerous to be a friend of America, right? In the 80s, in the 80s when Japan's manufacturing was just skyrocketing, right? Oh, Japan was becoming a legitimate competitor to America, might have even surpassed America. America forced Japan into treaties that in the 80s and 90s that absolutely crashed Japan's economy, right? To make Japan less
100%.
competitive.
100%. Yep.
And so that showed a lot of global South countries, even if we are successful, wall dominated and sort of like a client state, let's say, of America. If we any benefit that we get out of it, if we get too big, if we get too strong, America's just gonna fuck us over for itself.
Exactly.
So I think there are just many incentives to just politically divorce yourself from America. It's almost like having a bad husband.
The abusive husband, right? America's always like the abusive husband, the abusive boyfriend, and that is exactly what it is, because America has put this artificial ceiling on all these countries. And in the globalized internet first TikTok, Instagram world, where people all across the world, for example, in Haiti, this is the first time on earth where there's a presidential debate in the United States where they say, hey, Haitians eat like pets. Immediately, instantaneously, that is being broadcasted in Haiti. Haitians living in Haiti are saying this on their social media. They have an opinion that they can share, that opinion that gets across to all of the world. You cannot win this war. Like, it's already lost, and now it's just we'll just kill everyone who doesn't disagree. That shit never works. It's never worked, and it never will. And I think isolationism will be the greatest thing that happens to America, because look at Spain. And they're living it up. It's awesome in Spain, right? And they used to be the colonial power. Look at like all of these ex-colonial powers realized that at one point the running of the empire, it just isn't economically feasible, and the United States is in that position. And right now they're trying to divert all of their energy from the Middle East to a war with China, and it just isn't materializing. China is just not taking the bait, and also China isn't ideologically as inclined as the US. They also don't have global aspirations. China, all throughout their history, which is all of human history, has had one condition, which is we want to control our hemisphere, or not even our hemisphere, our side of control. Maybe they butt heads with India, but it's not a real war with China with India, right? Because China is just so far ahead of India that they're not a real threat. India is not a real threat to China. Yeah. So the United States, and that also reminds me of the story where when the European powers in the 1600s, 1400s, whatever, were going and discovering the new world, as they like to call it. The main technology then was lightweight ships that could cross oceans. And the Chinese empire at the time saw it and they were like, okay, that's the game now. We go to these quote unquote undiscovered places around the world with lightweight ships and take everything that they have to build wealth. Okay, we're going to play this game. And immediately the Chinese, being the Chinese, made the most slick aerodynamic ships at the time, where Portuguese sailors, who were the dominant explorers at the time, wrote their versions of State Department memos talking about how Chinese technology and ships were a big boon. And Chinese ships at the time were so good that they were just going to Africa from China very fast. And it made Chinese merchants who owned these ships so rich that they challenged the Chinese emperor. And then the Chinese emperor, I'm forgetting the name, went and not only destroyed all of the ships, but basically made a decree where shipbuilding to go and explore new worlds was banned. And so, Spain and Portugal and then the UK basically had that. But it would have been China that won the war. It wouldn't have even been close. And right now we saw that too. For example, in the early 2010s, when the Game of the World was making mobile apps, the proliferation of the blue app on Facebook was the biggest thing. Then Instagram and WhatsApp was taking over the world. And then China was like, okay, this is the game. We're going to do that. And you had the Alibaba, putting competition on Amazon. And so much so, even today, there's only 2 countries on earth that have tech companies that have a valuation of $1 trillion. That's China and the United States. And similarly, she saw that Alibaba and the guy Jack Ma was becoming bigger than China. He was like a huge celebrity in the world in the early 2010s. And guess what? They completely broke that sector. They kneecapped the Chinese mobile phone technology. Do you know what Tencent is? It's like, I think they make, what's that game that everyone loves?
Genshin Impact?
Exactly, yeah. Genshin Impact and all of these games, for example, are all made by Tencent, right? And Tencent is one of the biggest companies in the world. And guess what? The Tencent guy was also sent in a art camp because they all got too powerful. And China knows that if you just let capitalists run ragged, they're going to just take over the government. And this is why they intentionally kneecap their own industry. And now they are letting their EV industry fly. There's going to be an EV billionaire from China. And guess what? In 10 years, they're going to kneecap that too.
Yeah. China seems to be able to, because it is, state capitalist, socialism with characteristics, whatever you want to call it. China is so much better able to plan ahead 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years into the future. And is able to actually, when a billionaire starts challenging the interests of the Chinese people or even the Chinese state itself, able to curb it, stomp it out, or put it under its control. Jack Ma was put very quickly onto a leash by the Chinese state, you could sort of say. Whereas in America, we're thinking about next quarter, basically.
Imagine Jeff Bezos, putting Jeff Bezos on the leash. Jeff Bezos puts the U.S. government on the leash, like it's the other way around.
Exactly. So it's long-term planning versus short-term planning, and you can sort of see that in how America is trying so hard not to directly go to war with China, though I'm sure they would love to, but through a proxy go to war with China, sort of poking China with Taiwan, the Philippines, boosting Australia as sort of a regional ally, and yet they cannot get China to take the bait because America needs that war. China doesn't. This is as simple as that. China does not need a war with America because China doesn't need a place to put glut in, to put extra investments into its military-industrial complex sector. America absolutely, and American investors absolutely need to put that extra glut, extra investment into its military-industrial complex sector. And so they're continually trying to probe China, and China does not take that bait. They did get it with Russia, but Russia has sort of absolutely humiliated America. And while I'm sure American investors are very happy with how Ukraine is going, they've basically bought Ukraine and reconstruction within Ukraine. The American empire itself And of course, I'm not defending Putin or Putinist actions and things like that, but
Why not? No, I'm kidding. I love Putin. Dang, I thought you were a real communist. Never mind. Dang.
please send me the checks, Putin. I will
Yeah,
produce
yeah.
propaganda. Um, but Russia has humiliated America by showing that with only 3% of the world's
Yeah.
military spending compared to America's, just insane 45%, 35%. Don't quote me on that. I don't have the exact number, but the majority of the world's military spending, Russia can hold off the brunt of the Western world. Like, that is insane. And Hamas, in some ways, has humiliated America and Israel. I mean, the majority of, and this is not to downplay Hamas's amazing organizational skills, of course, the aid that they get from Iran and Hezbollah, which, of course, also is from China. China sells weapons to both these countries.
Yeah.
But what is it? Like a couple guys in Adidas shoes with a Soviet-era gun against the brunt of the Western world, against billions upon billions of dollars. The whole brunt of the Western world has been spent against a couple guys in buildings with Adidas shoes on. And the guys with Adidas shoes on are winning. Like, that is insane.
Yeah.
NATO, America.
Also, Houthis in Yemen, right, who completely upended how naval warfare is done. Like, they're going to teach that in naval classes because you have this group of people. And the problem is all of these aircraft carriers and stuff, the United States has realized this shit is all tech. You're basically coming in, and the Houthis have the equivalent of smartphones that are cheap but high tech. And the United States has like a 65-inch television, which is like this old blundering, And right now, I saw that the United States is sending these requests to startups in Silicon Valley to create these autonomous drones. But what the startups in Silicon Valley is like, yeah, give us the money, we'll create the drones. And then they take the money and then they write really cool graphs, very nice presentations. But then when it actually comes to manufacturing the drone, and you have to do it in the United States because you can't, unfortunately, just give it to China, your Jack and Jill of the world aren't as good as being factory workers. And they're figuring that out. So they're like, okay, we will just fleece the US government for hundreds of millions of dollars on just this PowerPoint presentations on how our autonomous drones will completely destroy the Houthis. We won't make shit, but, who cares? Like, there's going to be a new administration in 6 months anyway. We'll already have taken the money. So that's what's going on in America. And you know what happens when the Chinese government gives a contract to a Chinese company? They make sure that company makes the thing. Because if you don't make the thing, not only will you not get the money, but there will be criminal charges against the CEO, right? Whereas in America, you can murder anyone you want. If you're like a shareholder of a company, literally nothing will happen. When was the last time? I can't even think of the last time, right? Like an executive got, charged with something. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and of course, America's military is so bloated with just pocket lining, corruption, just wasted money, where the Houthis are absolutely humiliating America by taking down multi-million-dollar drones. And it's like, where did that money go? Like, if that drone is taken down so easily by, I mean, I'm not gonna downplay the Houthis and like their amazing organizational abilities, but like, it almost feels like you're getting taken down by guys in Adidas shoes once again. Like,
literally, yeah. Adidas slides, Adidas slides, and just exactly. And the thing is that the Houthis should not have any. But it just shows that the United States didn't move on or didn't innovate in their military capabilities, because it's no surprise that lightweight drones and guerrilla tactics are the name of the game in the 21st century. It's just like the United States knew. They also spent a lot of money to counteract these things, but at the end of the day, you still need to build the tech. And guess what? America cannot build the tech. You just can't, because you can't not manufacture anything in your country for 50 years and then just expect just manufacturing to happen. It just doesn't happen. It's very, very hard. And especially high-tech manufacturing, like I was seeing how if the United States wanted to build like a AI chip plant in the US, even if they did it in the most efficient way, which never happens in the US, it would still take upwards of 10 years. And by that time, like AI chips will be irrelevant because, shit moves so fast. And the empire is in a decline. Like if I was 18 right now, living in a third world country, I would never have moved to the United States for a better vision or whatever, right? Because it's like, hey, I'll just do the thing online, right? Why would I need to move? And that's why you're seeing a lot of this brain drain from the United States going back, because a lot of these grunt work are done by immigrants. Because if you're born in the United States, you're kind of like, don't want to relax. You don't want to like do stuff. It is the immigrants who have a chip on their shoulder and you want to make stuff. And that's also bad because I feel like immigrants are also some of the most pro-imperialist people you see, like the Vivek Ramaswamis of the world are so just hell-bent on proving that even though they are not quote-unquote American as in white, they still want to go like prove that no, I love imperialism. Like Donald Lu, for example, who's the State Department head of Southeast Asia, he's like destroying Southeast Asian countries to show how much he loves imperialism in America, right? And he's like of Chinese descent. So the immigrant class of America, especially the sons and daughters of immigrants, I'm looking at you, Poke. So in 10 years, I better not see you, be the new CEO of a weapons manufacturing company, right?
I am very, very, very distantly related to Nikki Haley. So
Okay,
I do.
I do. Right, exactly. Yeah, Namrata, right? Yeah, we love Namrata. But see, that's the thing, right? And I think the sons and daughters of immigrants really have this chip on their shoulder because they got made fun of in school because their food was smelly, and now they have to do imperialism, right? So that's the thing. And I feel like go ahead.
Is also immigration from like South Asia is a very it's a filter effect. Only the people, if you can afford that plane ticket to America already, you're already elite.
Yeah, it's a $2,000 ticket.
Indian society. I mean, you're obviously high caste, and so a lot of these people bring their sort of elite ideology.
It's not the janitor shortcoming. No aid, but it's not like the lower rungs of the economy. It's like, hey, my parents are doctors and you get to go, or like it's stuff like that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
that's why you see Nigerian immigrants, for example, do phenomenally well. Indian immigrants do really well. It's just because it's the Nigerian immigrants and the Indian immigrants, for example, that would do anywhere, that they would do well anywhere, no matter what. For example, and Kamala Harris likes to talk about how her parents, similar to yours, were also had Marxist ideals, right? And she loves to say that, and that's the thing. Like the immigrants that come here, like your parents' generation, were extremely based, but they were very like, just do the thing, like shut up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not to say your parents are like that, of course, mine are, but that's the thing. They don't really know that. Hey, like they don't really care. It's just like shit's hard. It's very easy to make money in America compared to third world countries. It is very easy. Like if you do food delivery and stuff, you can make like, compared to what a third world person will be like, oh wow, this is really, really great.
Yeah. Of course, what gets you is the cost of living, but still, if you put in enough,
they don't know that by the time they come here, right? By the time they come here, it's too late.
It used to be if you put in enough elbow grease, you could get yourself not a bad deal. Like you could work for Pizza Hut in the 80s, 90s, and get yourself a nice apartment, or maybe even save for a home, possibly. But I don't think that is possible anymore.
If you say that to someone now, they'll punch you in the like. That is so unreasonable. Like that is so like, especially people from your generation. That's such an unreasonable. It's like, what do you mean? Like I just have a job and can afford living. Like that. That's just not a thing anymore.
Absolutely. And then also back then you could sort of hope to move your way up into a company. You would work for a company for years. And so you would be a Domino's delivery driver, and then you would move your way up to Domino's manager and then regional manager or something like that. And, it would be a good deal. Nowadays, I think the neoliberal mode of production is just so desperate to squeeze every single last bit of value it can out of workers, surplus value, that it's just sort of, get in here. I'm going to abuse you as much as I can for a year or 6 months. And then eventually you'll grow enough balls to leave, or I'll fire you. And then you'll get another job with another shitty company, and the cycle of abuse continues.
Yeah, and then you watch Pokepreet TikToks, and you're like, wait, there's another system? Wait. And then, like, you're on the dark side.
Yeah. Yeah, but definitely this is a dying empire, and what we are witnessing are the death throes of a dying empire. Uh,
100%.
as America globally engages in, say, the Russo-Ukrainian war, the Gaza genocide, and even periphery conflicts that are not directly involved with America but have America's hands in it, like the Sudanese crisis, Congolese genocide. Where do you think this? What do you think this does in terms of the balance of world powers? Is it hastening America's collapse? Does it sort of give America a little bit of stability, say, maybe perhaps within Ukraine or Russia, or does it actually empower America's enemies? You know, China, Russia, things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If I had an answer to that, I would be in a private jet right now. And on my right would be Hillary Clinton, and on my left would be the Larry Ellison son who just bought Paramount. So I don't have a good answer for you there. But I do think that in the short term, it is bad for America, but in the long term, it is great for America because the only reason China can even amount a challenge to America is because they don't have to run a global empire. That's why they have some extra cash that they can spend to, go to Cambodia and build a canal so that Cambodia feels loyalty to America. They can go to Vietnam and build a high-speed rail. They can go to Bangladesh and build a nuclear reactor only because they have extra money because they don't have to, run a proxy war, right? So that's literally so. I think in the short term, the United States will be fucked because a lot of these systems a lot of these imperialist systems that are put in place, for example, 180 something military bases, which are just losing money because they don't do anything. And they're only making money for the military contracts that put them there. And there's going to be a reckoning where there's going to be short-term pain for the United States. But in the long term, the United States will win because in the long term, once hopefully this imperialist system is collapsed, the United States, which still has a very dynamic immigrant population, they have, dynamic individuals such as yourself who are incredible critical thinkers that once, they can really be like, okay, we're not doing imperialism anymore. Now we can have, prosperity at home. I think there will be a new renaissance. I think it'll be like the 20s in America, but it won't be artificial growth. It'll be real growth. So that's in the long term. I am very bullish on America and also only because of the immigrant population that they've had. The last 150 years, they've just sucked in all of the brain power from the global third world, like the fact that yourself. Exactly, yeah. So, that shit will pay off because a lot of their children and their children and their children will not go back to the global south because they're so Americanized. They'll just live here. But in the short term, it is absolutely going to suck. And the unfortunate reality is, Poke, me and you are in the short term. So it's going to suck for us. It's going to be horrendously bad for the next two generations because it'll be the unwinding of the empire. And it'll be really bad for this generation and the next. You're just gonna have to eat it. But whatever the next two generations are, I think it'll be good for them because I think once this imperialist, the rule the world thing is over, and I also don't think the world will go back to a like a duopoly, China, America. I think it'll be a more multipolar world. I think we'll have regional powers, but who knows? You never know. Right? America could, and this is also a possibility. America could also pull off global imperialism. They could do something that completely destabilizes China. She could die, right? She could. Exactly, yeah, that could happen. And there are other forces in China that want Xi to die that are going to be, the Stalin to the Lenin, right? Where there was an ideological framework, but that ideological framework, if given to someone who loves power a little bit too much, can be destabilized. But it's hard to happen in China because the political system of China is so robust where it's, for example, if you are like a promising young politician in China, they're not going to be just propping you up in the startup like the United States does. For example, if you're like a Pete Buttigieg in China, they're not just going to make you the head of the transportation. They're not going to make you transportation secretary because you're like a smooth talking, a good looking person. They're going to make you the most promising young politicians in China become mayors of tier 3 cities in China, which is basically where no one wants to go. And then after 2 years, they are going to basically examine you and the other promising mayors of those tier 3 cities, how you all did. They're going to pick the top 10, and those top 10 are going to then go through a grueling exam. And then based on the results of those exams, one will be promoted to a tier 2 city mayor. And then that keeps happening until you become, like a legitimate part of the Chinese Communist Party. And that is a very good system of governance. That's why you have these incredibly dynamic politicians in China, like the foreign minister of China, like he had like a recent debate with Mehdi Hassan. Absolutely schooled Mehdi Hassan like yesterday, because Mehdi Hassan is just, like he's very, I like him, but he was taught in the West, so he doesn't have a lot of knowledge like the Chinese foreign minister has, right? And
He's
so
liberal too.
yeah, he's a huge lib, right? Exactly. So he's like, oh, I know October 7th, like Hamas is still bad, like that's his stand. And he got like humiliated by the Chinese foreign minister, who actually had to study, unlike Mehdi, who's just like, Mehdi is like us, who's just like some guy on the internet. He's not, he didn't like, not to, no offense, okay, but he's just some guy on the internet. He isn't this like huge scholar who's dedicated his life to the study of X, Y, and Z, right? He's just a dynamic person. Like me and you, for example, we're internet personalities, but if we were really had to go head to head against experts, I'm talking about myself, I would be found out because I'm just some guy, right? I'm just some guy who reads news, right? I'm not an expert. And Mehdi Hassan is just us. He's not expert. And a lot of people in the United States, for example, Ben Shapiro is like Mehdi Hassan, right? They're not experts. They're not these luminaries of subject matter. They're just some guy who can do rage bait.
Yeah. I'm Carlos Martinez, who wrote this great book, The East is Still Red, which is like probably the best book about modern day China. He said he was talking to a Chinese woman, and she said that she can never imagine somebody like Trump becoming the ruler of China, because if you want to rise through the ranks of the Chinese political system, you actually have to serve your fucking community. Like you actually have to do good. You actually have to organize. You actually have to give something to people for them to want to advance you. Whereas in America, it's a very as much as we love to claim that we're a meritocracy and yada yada, we're not. It's a son. Who is Trump? He's just the son of a rich guy, like who got a loan of $1 million. Like everybody was laughing about that. But the fact that a man who is that goofy, who is that much of a almost fail son, I would say, America is ruled by so many. The fact that he got into the levers of power just sort of shows you where it is. I think China's biggest issue would be, of course, with allowing in the free market, there is this bourgeois elite, whatever sector of China, whatever you want to call it, that wants to sell out China, that wants to be sort of become not a nationalistic bourgeois, a comprador bourgeois. And for anybody who's listening that doesn't know the difference, a comprador bourgeois is a capitalist that sells out your country to another country, sort of like is like an intertwined middleman for exchanging resources. And national bourgeois is a rich man who just exchanges products within your country. And so I think China, anytime it cracks down on a billionaire, is trying to keep that rising comprador bourgeois with that comprador aspirations just in check.
100%. So you're Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
So what is the prevailing, like, what is your, and this is going to be like an extremely boomer question, but how do you see your generation? Because, like I'm obviously the generation before you, I'm a millennial. And, if the millennials were the hopeless generation, right? We never made anything of ourselves. And the Gen Z is seen as like the great American hope. What is your perspective on this current generation? Because Gen Z is going to be the one that's going to be in power next, right? Because you guys are going to be the one that has power. You guys are, I think, in your mid-20s, early 20s now. So you guys also drive culture. Where do you see this going? Where do you see your generation? Are you positive? Are you hopeless? And how do you see it going?
Well, first of all, I would say that not even millennials are in power currently. It's boomers. Like, you guys have no power. We're being driven.
No, we have no power.
Boomers and silent generation people. but I would say Gen Z is, first of all, it's probably the most it has a political consciousness. It's very open to new ideas, rather than how America's traditionally done. It's very open to socialism. Yeah, whatever definitions of socialism it has. Its definitions of socialism are Bernie Sanders kind of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nordic model. But it is very open to a new way of running America. But I also think Gen Z is sort of, as much as it is open to new ideas, it is also sort of a post-ironic generation where it sort of accepts that climate change is happening, and it sort of falls into this, yeah, the world's gonna end, and I'm just gonna laugh at it, right? Everything going crazy, and this shit's going down. Living standards are going down. I don't really have a secure future. And obviously millennials have gone through that, and millennials were the generation that was promised everything, right? And you guys got bitten in the ass by reality. Well, Gen Z has sort of already seen, having experienced like the 2008 financial crisis and things like that, that there is no secure future, and just sort of laughs at it.
It's just like really, it is perfectly put, the post-ironic. I've seen that about your generation too, where it's just like, oh, we've been fucked. Like, what's the point? Like, it's almost like that. Whereas millennials, at least like growing up, we had this, false sense of hope. It just comes from the 90s, because the things were so good in the 90s, because like it was the start of this hegemonic control of the United States. As we know it now, there was still a hegemon then, but this control of just every sphere of culture, every sphere of like, military. So yeah, it was, that is what it is. I do have to head out though, if that's okay. I have a hard stop at night.
We'll wrap up then. So thank you so much for being on. This has been Inconvenient Truth. Do you have any closing words, and where can we best find you?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me on. Hopefully, whoever's watching got some value. Yeah, I'm the Inconvenient Truth on TikTok. I don't have any other social media or anything, so if you're on TikTok, go give me a follow. I talk about international news, just what's going on around the world. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Would love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, of course. This has been a great conversation. You have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
And
Bye.
go follow Inconvenient Truth on TikTok.
Oh,
as long as TikTok remains in America.
Yeah, as long as TikTok is there, please follow me. I need the followers.
All right. Bye-bye. This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely... And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.